What if a 10-year-old had an IQ higher than Einstein? What if that child could solve problems that even the brightest minds on the planet couldn't begin to understand? Imagine the possibilities: new technologies, world-changing inventions, or even solutions to problems we've been grappling with for centuries. But what happens when you put a child prodigy in front of someone like Elon Musk, one of the most brilliant entrepreneurs and innovators of our time? The result is jaw-dropping. But this isn't some far-off fantasy. This is real. A 10-year-old boy named Ethan Thompson was taking the world by storm, challenging the very fabric of what we thought was possible. He wasn't just a genius. He was something else, a prodigy with an IQ that soared beyond any traditional measure, far beyond even Einstein's legendary intellect. It all started when whispers of his abilities began circulating among the most elite minds in the tech world. The whispers grew louder, and soon, the world had its eyes on the mysterious boy who was said to have cracked problems that even seasoned physicists and engineers were struggling to solve. And it wasn't just that Ethan had an amazing memory or exceptional problem-solving skills. He saw the world differently, with a depth and clarity that astonished even the most respected experts. Ethan's rise to fame was nothing short of extraordinary. At age 10, he had already developed algorithms that could predict patterns in data, designed advanced machines in his garage, and even discovered new ways to harness renewable energy. It was as if his mind was a window to a future none of us could yet comprehend. And it was no surprise that, at some point, the name Elon Musk was brought up in the same breath as Ethan's. Musk, who was always ahead of the curve in the world of technology and innovation, heard the rumors. At first, he dismissed them. A child genius? Sure, it sounded like an interesting story, but Musk had seen it all before. There were always claims of wunderkinds and brilliant minds, but in the end, most of them fizzled out. But something about this boy, this 10-year-old prodigy, felt different. After all, Musk had built rockets that landed themselves, revolutionized electric vehicles, and dreamed of sending humans to Mars. If anyone could spot true genius, it would be him. So, Musk decided to take a closer look. He made arrangements to meet Ethan. What followed was nothing short of an encounter that would change both of their lives forever. The meeting took place in a private conference room at a tech summit, where Musk was scheduled to speak. The room was sleek and modern, with large windows offering a view of the city below. Ethan sat across from Musk, his small frame a stark contrast to the towering figure of the billionaire entrepreneur. But despite his youth, Ethan exuded an air of quiet confidence, as if he knew something the rest of the world didn't. "Ethan, it's a pleasure to meet you," Musk said, extending his hand. Ethan looked up, his bright blue eyes sharp and calculating. "The pleasure's mine, Mr. Musk. I've been following your work for a while now. You're doing some impressive things." Musk raised an eyebrow. This wasn't your typical child. Most kids would be starstruck by meeting someone like Musk, but not Ethan. He was already thinking on a higher plane. "Thank you," Musk replied, settling into his seat. "So, what's this I hear about your work on renewable energy and AI? I've seen some reports that you've cracked some things that even I haven't been able to." Ethan smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a child bragging about a school project. It was the smile of someone who had already solved problems that the world hadn't even begun to understand. "I think I've found a way to make solar energy more efficient," Ethan said. "And I've also been working on ways to integrate AI into that process to predict weather patterns and energy consumption, to make sure we're using energy where it's needed most." Musk leaned forward, intrigued. "That's impressive for a 10-year-old. But you're not just talking about simple solutions, are you? You're talking about transforming entire industries." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Exactly. The world doesn't need another small solution. It needs something groundbreaking. Something that will change the way we think about energy and technology." Musk could feel the weight of those words. This wasn't just a kid playing around with ideas. Ethan was thinking on a scale that was both grand and terrifying. For a moment, Musk felt something he rarely ever felt: intimidation. Not because he didn't think he could match Ethan's intellect, but because he realized how much Ethan could outthink him. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. This kid had the potential to change the world in ways Musk hadn't even dared to imagine. "Tell me more," Musk said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How do you plan to do all of this?" Ethan paused, and for the first time, Musk saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I've been working on it for years. But there's still a lot to figure out. Some of the concepts I'm working with are unconventional. Some people might not understand them." Musk smiled. "Unconventional is good. It's the unconventional ideas that often lead to the biggest breakthroughs." For the next few hours, the two of them discussed everything from AI to space travel, from renewable energy to the ethics of advanced technology. Musk had worked with some of the best minds in the world, but there was something unique about Ethan. He wasn't just an inventor. He was a visionary. As the meeting wrapped up, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that he had just met someone who would shape the future in ways that he couldn't even begin to predict. Ethan wasn't just a genius. He was a force of nature, a child who saw the world differently, who understood problems in ways that most people couldn't even dream of. When Musk left the meeting, he did so with a sense of awe. He'd spent his entire career pushing the boundaries of what was possible, but here was a 10-year-old boy who had already pushed those boundaries farther than he ever could have imagined. This was just the beginning. The world was about to see what happened when two brilliant minds, one with decades of experience and the other with a limitless future, collided. The result? It was going to be jaw-dropping. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ethan Thompson's story wasn't one that could be easily understood by most people. It wasn't the typical tale of a child prodigy who excelled in school or completed college-level courses by the age of 8. No, Ethan's brilliance was on another level entirely, a level that defied conventional understanding. Born in a quiet town in Oregon, Ethan's early years were unremarkable. His parents, Emma and Daniel Thompson, were both high school teachers, neither of them particularly involved in the world of technology or academia. They had no reason to expect that their son would one day be known as one of the greatest intellectual prodigies of the 21st century. But from a young age, Ethan showed signs that he was different. When he was just 2 years old, he could already read at a level that surpassed most children his age. By the time he turned 4, he was solving complex puzzles meant for adults and memorizing entire books in days. It wasn't long before his parents realized that their son was special, but even they didn't fully understand just how extraordinary he was. Ethan's parents were determined to give him a normal childhood. They enrolled him in public school like any other child, but that quickly became a problem. At age 5, Ethan had already completed most of the standard curriculum and was bored by the material. He'd finish his assignments in a fraction of the time it took the other kids, and then he'd spend the rest of the day reading about things like advanced physics, artificial intelligence, and quantum mechanics. By age 6, he had built his first robot, one that could recognize and respond to voice commands. The toy was nothing like the robots you'd find in a store. It could perform complex tasks, and Ethan had programmed it himself. His parents, of course, were amazed but didn't know the first thing about robotics, so they reached out to local experts. When they saw the robot, they were dumbfounded. It wasn't supposed to be possible for a child of his age to design something that sophisticated. By age 8, Ethan's reputation as a prodigy spread across the tech community. He'd written algorithms to predict the stock market, designed a new form of energy-efficient solar panel, and even built an AI that could mimic the brain's neural networks. But it wasn't just that Ethan was brilliant. It was how he saw the world. He wasn't just solving problems that others couldn't, he was thinking in ways no one had even considered. The first major breakthrough came when he was 9. Ethan published a paper on quantum computing that was so advanced that even top universities couldn't believe it was written by a child. Experts said the concepts were years ahead of their time. And what was even more baffling was that the paper didn't just present ideas, it offered practical, real-world applications for the concepts, something that most adult researchers had yet to accomplish. Ethan's discoveries didn't stop there. His parents, proud but increasingly overwhelmed, watched as the world began to take notice. By the time he was 10, Ethan had already been invited to speak at major tech conferences. His presentations left even the most seasoned scientists in awe. And that's when the rumors started, rumors that this 10-year-old had an IQ that far surpassed anyone else's, even Einstein himself. But as Ethan's fame grew, so did the challenges. People were skeptical. Could a child really have a higher IQ than the legendary physicist who had revolutionized the world with his theories of relativity? Or was it just a publicity stunt? But the proof was in the work. Ethan's ability to solve problems that adults couldn't even fathom was undeniable. At first, the skepticism didn't bother Ethan. In fact, it only fueled his drive. He didn't care about the accolades or recognition. His focus was singular, to make a meaningful contribution to the world, one that would leave a lasting legacy. But as his ideas became more ambitious, the pressure mounted. His parents, though supportive, were starting to feel the weight of Ethan's brilliance as well. They were just two regular people who happened to have an extraordinary son, and they didn't know how to handle the overwhelming attention and expectations. They didn't know how to help him navigate a world that didn't quite know what to do with a child genius. Despite the challenges, Ethan's relationships with his parents remained strong. They were his anchors in a world that constantly demanded more from him. His father, Daniel, often said, "You don't have to change the world, son. Just be yourself." And his mother, Emma, would smile and tell him, "You're perfect just the way you are. We love you, not because of your genius, but because you're our son." But even with their support, Ethan's world was about to get even more complicated. The moment Elon Musk's name came into the conversation, everything changed. Musk was someone Ethan admired, someone who had already accomplished what most people could only dream of. But now, the two of them were about to cross paths in a way that would set the stage for a collision of ideas, ideals, and egos. Musk had been following Ethan's progress from afar, reading his papers and attending his presentations. He was intrigued by Ethan's approach to problem solving. There was something about the way Ethan viewed the world that was radically different from the way Musk had approached his own ventures. It was as if Ethan was seeing into the future in a way that no one else could. And so, after weeks of private discussions with his team, Musk made a decision. He was going to meet Ethan. He was going to see for himself if this 10-year-old genius could really live up to the hype. Ethan didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change forever. The day had arrived. Ethan Thompson had been informed that Elon Musk himself wanted to meet him, but the news didn't faze the 10-year-old genius in the slightest. After all, it wasn't the first time a big name had sought him out. He had already been contacted by leading universities, high-profile researchers, and tech moguls, all eager to work with him, but he'd always declined. To Ethan, meeting people was about ideas, not names or fame. And if Musk wanted to meet him, it was likely because Ethan had something he wanted. His parents, on the other hand, were a little more nervous. They were proud of their son's achievements but had no idea what to expect from such a high-stakes encounter. "Just remember, sweetheart, don't let the pressure get to you," his mother, Emma, said as she adjusted his shirt before the meeting. "You're here because of your mind, not your age." Ethan smiled at his mother. "I know, Mom. It's just another meeting, right?" he said, his voice betraying none of the excitement he actually felt inside. He wasn't nervous. In fact, he was eager. The meeting was set for a private session in a sleek conference room at one of Musk's headquarters. Elon Musk had arranged everything, and when Ethan entered the room, he was met by the tall figure of the Tesla and SpaceX mogul himself. Musk was as imposing as ever, but there was a certain warmth in his eyes when he looked at Ethan. "Ethan, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person," Musk said, offering a handshake. Ethan shook his hand firmly, his blue eyes meeting Musk's with an intensity that surprised even the billionaire. "It's nice to meet you too, Mr. Musk." Musk didn't waste any time. He wanted to dive into the conversation, to get straight to the point. "I've been following your work for a while now," Musk began. "The quantum computing paper. Impressive. But I'm curious, what's next? What problem are you solving right now?" Ethan didn't flinch. "I'm working on solving the energy storage issue," he said. "Solar power is great, but the problem with it is efficiency and storage. If we can't store energy reliably, we can't use it efficiently. I've been looking into a new material for batteries that could change the game." Musk leaned forward, his interest piqued. This was the kind of conversation he loved, one that involved tangible solutions to real-world problems. But what caught his attention even more was Ethan's confidence and clarity. It wasn't the typical bravado of a teenager bragging about their latest project. Ethan was speaking with the precision and expertise of someone far older, someone who had already done the hard work of figuring out the science. "What material are you looking at?" Musk asked, his curiosity growing. "Something new? Or an improvement on existing tech?" Ethan paused, taking a moment to collect his thoughts before answering. "I'm working on a hybrid material, partly graphene, partly carbon nanotubes. The combination could increase energy density by more than 50%, and the best part is that it could be produced with existing manufacturing techniques. That means no major infrastructure changes. It's scalable." Musk's eyes widened. "That's incredibly promising. You've done the math, I assume?" Ethan smiled, nodding. "Of course. I've run simulations. They're still in the early stages, but I believe it's feasible." The two sat in silence for a moment, both of them lost in thought. Musk had heard of many ideas before, but something about this kid's approach was different. He wasn't just talking about theoretical possibilities, he was talking about real-world applications that could revolutionize industries. And Musk could see it. This wasn't just a child with a high IQ. This was someone who could genuinely change the world. "You know," Musk said finally, breaking the silence, "most kids your age are worried about math homework or playing video games. And here you are, solving the energy crisis." Ethan chuckled softly. "Well, I don't have time for video games. There's too much to do." Musk leaned back in his chair, considering what Ethan had said. It was obvious that this wasn't just a fleeting interest for Ethan. This wasn't a hobby or a passing fancy. This was his life's work. And Musk, ever the visionary, saw the potential in that. "You're not just working on energy storage, though, are you?" Musk asked, his gaze never leaving Ethan. "You've got bigger plans." Ethan nodded, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "The energy storage is just the start. I'm working on creating a self-sustaining energy grid. Something that uses renewable energy sources, stores it, and distributes it efficiently. Think of it as a global network of interconnected solar-powered hubs. That way, we can eliminate fossil fuel dependence completely." Musk raised his eyebrows. "That's a bold vision. And I love it. It's ambitious. You're thinking big, and that's exactly what we need. But the challenge isn't just technical. It's political, social, and economic." "I know," Ethan replied. "But the technology is there. It's just a matter of making it scalable. And that's what I'm focused on." Musk could feel the weight of Ethan's words. The boy wasn't just talking about solving problems, he was talking about changing the entire global infrastructure. Musk had always been one to think big, to tackle challenges that others deemed impossible. But here was a 10-year-old who was thinking even bigger. The conversation shifted between various ideas, some related to energy, others to space exploration and artificial intelligence. For every question Musk asked, Ethan had a calculated and thoughtful answer. It became clear to Musk that the potential in this young mind was limitless. Ethan wasn't just another genius, he was a visionary who saw a world that was waiting for change, and he was determined to make that change happen. As the meeting wrapped up, Musk stood up and extended his hand once more. "Ethan, I don't know what the future holds, but I can tell you one thing, you're going to be a force to be reckoned with. I'd love to work with you on this. Ethan shook his hand firmly. I'd like that, Mr. Musk. Let's change the world. With that, the meeting ended. Musk walked out of the conference room, his mind racing with the possibilities. Ethan had just shared his vision with him, and it was a vision that could change everything. But what Musk didn't know yet was that Ethan's journey was about to take a sharp turn. The challenges ahead were not just about technology. They were about power, influence, and the weight of the world's expectations. And while Musk had just met a future genius, he had no idea that their collaboration would lead to a confrontation of ideas, one that would leave everyone involved questioning everything they thought they knew. The meeting with Elon Musk had left Ethan both energized and contemplative. Walking out of the Tesla headquarters, Ethan couldn't help but replay the conversation in his mind, like an equation waiting to be solved. This was a pivotal moment in his life. For the first time, someone like Musk, a true innovator and risk-taker, had seen something in him. And Musk wasn't just interested in what Ethan could do, he wanted to be a part of it. Ethan's parents, who had been anxiously waiting outside the meeting room, noticed the change in his demeanor when he walked out. His eyes were alight with a sense of purpose they hadn't seen before. "Well?" Daniel asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and concern. "How did it go?" Ethan turned to his father with a grin. "It went well. Really well." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? What did he say?" Ethan's excitement was palpable. "He wants to work with me, wants to help bring my projects to life. He thinks my energy storage idea is game-changing. We talked about building something even bigger, something that could power the entire world." Emma and Daniel exchanged glances. The idea that their son, at only 10 years old, was not just talking about theoretical projects but collaborating with one of the most influential men in the world was both thrilling and terrifying. "Ethan, are you sure?" Emma asked gently. "This is a huge opportunity, but it's also a lot of pressure." Ethan nodded. He had heard the concern in his mother's voice, but his mind was already racing forward. "I'm sure, Mom. This is my chance to make a real difference. Elon Musk believes in what I can do, and I want to prove it." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Well, we believe in you too. Just make sure you don't lose yourself along the way. Remember to take time for yourself, for us, for your childhood." "I won't forget," Ethan replied, giving his father a quiet, knowing smile. He appreciated their concern more than they could imagine, but deep down, he knew this was the path he had to walk. This wasn't just about solving problems or earning accolades. This was about leaving a legacy, one that could change the course of history. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Elon Musk and his team began to collaborate with Ethan in a way no one had anticipated. The partnership wasn't just about bouncing ideas back and forth, it was about shaping a new future. Musk's involvement gave Ethan access to resources he'd only dreamed about, a state-of-the-art lab, the brightest minds in the field, and most importantly, the funding to make his ideas a reality. Despite his youth, Ethan quickly adapted to the fast-paced, high-stakes world of Silicon Valley. Meetings were frequent and often lasted for hours. His projects moved from conceptual stages to prototypes faster than any of them could have imagined. Musk admired Ethan's ability to absorb and process information at an almost supernatural rate. But what truly impressed Musk was Ethan's focus on creating something that could help everyone, not just a select few. During one meeting, Musk leaned over his desk, eyeing Ethan with curiosity. "You know," he said, "I've worked with some of the brightest minds in the world. People who've created things that are changing the future. But there's something different about you. You're not just trying to push the boundaries of science. You're thinking about how to make the world better for everyone." Ethan paused, his gaze fixed on a blueprint of the energy storage system he was working on. "It's about sustainability," he said quietly. "We can't keep going the way we are, using resources that are destroying the planet. If we have the technology to change things, we need to use it. Otherwise, what's the point of all this? Musk nodded, clearly impressed. I agree. The problem is that people don't think like you. They're too focused on short-term profit or instant results. You're thinking in terms of decades, centuries, even. That's how long it'll take for us to fix things, Ethan said. But we have to start now. Their conversation shifted to other areas, space exploration, artificial intelligence, and even the potential for brain-computer interfaces. As they spoke, Musk continued to marvel at how well Ethan's ideas aligned with his own. The synergy between them was undeniable. Yet, as the days wore on, Musk began to sense an underlying tension, one that Ethan wasn't fully aware of. Despite the progress they were making, there was something off about the collaboration. Musk, who had always been a visionary but also a businessman, was beginning to notice a subtle shift in the dynamic. Ethan's ideas were bold, so bold that they threatened to upend entire industries. But Musk knew that the more Ethan pushed forward, the more powerful the forces against them would become. One evening, as they were wrapping up a meeting, Musk invited Ethan to dinner. He wanted to talk about something off the record. As they sat at a quiet table in one of Musk's private dining rooms, the conversation turned to the future. There's something you need to understand, Ethan, Musk said, leaning back in his chair. I've been in this game for a long time. And I've learned one very important thing: success doesn't just come from great ideas. It comes from being able to protect those ideas. From the people who will try to take them from you. And from the people who will try to stop you from making them happen. Ethan looked at Musk, intrigued but slightly confused. What do you mean? Musk's eyes darkened. The world is full of people who want to keep things the way they are. They don't want new technologies that could disrupt their power. If you're serious about changing the world, you're going to have to fight for your ideas. And that fight might not always be in the lab. Ethan's brow furrowed. I don't want to fight anyone. I just want to make things better. Musk sighed. I get it. But the reality is that the world doesn't always work the way we want it to. And if you want to change the world, you need to be prepared to face obstacles that are bigger than any problem you can solve with technology. The weight of Musk's words hung in the air. Ethan felt a shift within himself, a sense of unease creeping in. He had always known that changing the world wouldn't be easy, but hearing Musk put it so bluntly made the stakes feel higher than ever. As the dinner ended and Ethan prepared to leave, Musk placed a hand on his shoulder. Ethan, don't forget that you're not just up against technical challenges. The world will try to stop you. And when that happens, you need to be ready to make hard choices. Ethan nodded, still processing the conversation. He wasn't sure exactly what Musk meant, but one thing was clear: this journey was going to be more complicated than he had ever imagined. And what Musk didn't yet realize was that Ethan wasn't just ready to change the world, he was ready to confront everything standing in his way. As the weeks passed, Ethan's collaboration with Elon Musk became more intense, more immersive. Together, they pushed forward with the energy storage project, now at the forefront of the tech world's attention. News outlets and tech blogs had begun to cover their partnership, with headlines like "A 10-year-old genius joins forces with Elon Musk to solve the energy crisis" and "The future of energy: what happens when a child prodigy meets Elon Musk." The spotlight was on them, and Ethan was embracing it, but there was a growing sense of tension he couldn't shake. Elon had been right about one thing: success didn't just come from good ideas. It came with a price, and Ethan was starting to realize that price wasn't just paid in time, energy, or effort. It was paid in the form of powerful adversaries who would do anything to keep their status quo intact. It started with the first set of corporate meetings that Musk insisted they attend. As Ethan accompanied Musk to the sleek glass buildings of major energy companies, he began to see a side of the industry he'd never considered before. The polished executives and board members looked at Ethan with polite smiles, but their eyes told a different story. There was skepticism, yes, but there was also something deeper, something cold. Power. Control. Mr. Musk, One of the energy executives, a sharp-dressed man named Douglas Green, said during a meeting, "We are, of course, very excited about the progress being made here. But I have to ask, how realistic is this idea of energy storage on such a large scale? We've seen similar concepts before, but none have been able to reach commercialization. Is this really feasible?" Ethan watched Musk's face for a moment. The billionaire had an almost supernatural ability to read people, and this was no different. Musk, however, did not give in to Green's subtle challenge. Instead, he smiled and leaned forward, his hands on the table. "Ethan's idea isn't just another theory," Musk said confidently. "It's the future. And we have the capability to make it happen." Green exchanged a glance with another executive, and the unspoken communication was clear to Ethan. They were sizing him up, analyzing him, likely already calculating how they could keep control of the energy industry, should this young prodigy's idea actually become a reality. After the meeting, Ethan stayed close to Musk, sensing that something was off. "Do you think they believed us?" Ethan asked, the weight of the conversation still lingering in his mind. Musk's expression was guarded. "It's not about belief, Ethan. It's about power. Those companies hold the keys to global energy distribution. They're not going to hand that over without a fight." "Fight? You mean, like competition?" Ethan asked. Musk's eyes darkened slightly. "Competition is the easy part. It's the fight to change the system, the entrenched interests, the politics, that's where the real battle lies." Ethan absorbed his words carefully. This wasn't just about science and technology. There was a whole ecosystem of power players who stood to lose if they didn't protect their interests. Musk had known this for years, and now Ethan was being pulled into this web of high-stakes corporate maneuvering. The next few days only reinforced that sense of unease. Musk's team was working overtime on the energy storage technology, pushing new ideas and refining old ones. But as Ethan dove deeper into the science, he began to notice things that felt off. There were subtle suggestions, almost like the slow tightening of a noose. Musk's advisors kept hinting that they might need to make compromises in order to secure the project's future. "What kind of compromises?" Ethan asked one of them, a woman named Jessica, who was working on the financial side of things. Jessica gave a small, knowing smile. "You know, sometimes it's about making deals with the right people. Making the right alliances. If you're serious about changing the world, Ethan, you'll need to understand that power and influence are just as important as innovation." Ethan frowned. He wasn't sure if Jessica was speaking in metaphors or giving him a warning, but the implication was clear. Success in this world wasn't just about the purity of your ideas, it was about how you navigated the murky waters of politics, business, and influence. Later that evening, as Musk and Ethan sat in a quiet corner of the office, Musk spoke again about the complexities of the world they were trying to change. "You know, Ethan," Musk began, his voice quieter now, "the truth is, there are people who will try to steal your ideas or sabotage your work. They'll do whatever it takes to keep their power. We've seen it happen before. They'll come after you in ways you can't even imagine." Ethan's eyes widened slightly, the weight of Musk's words sinking in. He had never considered that his work, his ideas, could be under threat. He thought about the thousands of hours spent developing the energy storage material, the countless nights of research and trial and error. It wasn't just a project, it was his future. "What do we do?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but betraying a hint of uncertainty. Musk looked at him, his face a mixture of seriousness and admiration. "We keep moving forward. We don't let them stop us. But we also need to be strategic. We'll need allies, real ones. People who are willing to fight for the future, not just for themselves." It was then that Ethan realized just how much bigger the game had become. This wasn't just about technology anymore, this was a fight for the future of the world, and the stakes were higher than anything he had ever imagined. The next morning, Ethan received an unexpected call. The number was unfamiliar, and when he picked up, the voice on the other end was urgent and low. "Ethan, you don't know me, but you need to be careful," the voice said. "There are people who are watching you, people who won't let you change the energy system. You've got to get out of there before they make a move." Ethan's heart raced. Who was this person? And why were they warning him? Before he could ask more questions, the voice hung up. His mind spun, trying to process what had just happened. Who had known about his work? And why were they threatening him? The call was a stark reminder that the world he was entering wasn't the world he had envisioned, a place where big ideas could flourish without interference. Instead, it was a world where every breakthrough came with a price. As he sat there, staring at the phone, Ethan knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just about solving problems anymore. It was about survival. And no matter what, he wasn't backing down. The next few days felt like an emotional whirlwind for Ethan. The warning call had unsettled him, lingering like a shadow over his every move. Every glance in his direction, every conversation, seemed to carry an unspoken weight. It was as if the walls around him were closing in, slowly but surely. Despite his unease, the work continued. The energy storage project was progressing rapidly, thanks to Musk's unwavering support and his team's hard work. Ethan spent countless hours in the lab, refining his designs, pushing boundaries, and diving deep into the science. Yet, every time he returned to his office, the warning voice from the phone call replayed in his head. "People are watching you," the voice had said. "You've got to be careful." Ethan wasn't naive enough to believe that his work was just a simple, straightforward journey. He had seen how quickly things could shift in the world of high-tech innovation, how quickly enemies could emerge in the shadows. But who was trying to stop him, and why? As the project reached its next milestone, Musk invited Ethan to another one of his exclusive meetings, this time with a select group of investors. The energy storage project had generated incredible interest, and Musk had already secured a few partners eager to jump on board. It was all happening faster than Ethan could have imagined, but with that rapid progress came growing tension. The investors were a mix of venture capitalists, executives from energy companies, and a few mysterious figures whose faces Ethan didn't recognize. They all wore polished smiles, their eyes sharp and calculating. As they sat around a massive conference table, Ethan felt a sense of unease wash over him. He wasn't just a participant in the conversation, he was the subject of it. The room seemed to hum with an undercurrent of intrigue. Musk introduced Ethan, but it was clear that the real focus was on the potential financial returns of the project. The figures being discussed were astronomical. The investors were eager, but their enthusiasm felt more transactional than genuine. Ethan listened carefully as Musk spoke about the potential of the technology, outlining the way it could revolutionize energy storage, distribution, and sustainability on a global scale. But even as Musk spoke passionately about the future, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. There was an underlying tension in the air, something that no amount of smooth talk or financial projections could conceal. One of the investors, a man named Martin Reed, leaned forward after Musk finished his presentation. His voice was smooth, but there was a coldness to it that made Ethan's skin crawl. "Mr. Musk, Mr. Jameson, this is all very exciting," Reed said, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Ethan. "But I think we need to be realistic here. This project is ambitious, perhaps too ambitious. You're suggesting a total overhaul of the energy system. That's not just technical, it's political. It's going to ruffle a lot of feathers." Ethan glanced at Musk, who remained composed, but his jaw tightened slightly. Reed's words were loaded with more than just skepticism, there was a subtle threat hidden within them. "I understand the concerns," Musk said coolly. "But we're not just thinking about the technical aspects of this. We're thinking long-term, about what's best for the planet. This isn't about profit. It's about creating a sustainable future." Reed gave a thin smile. "Of course. But there are those in power who might not appreciate such a change. You've got to understand that people in the industry won't just sit idly by while something like this upends the balance." Ethan's pulse quickened. He couldn't help but sense that Reed's words weren't just idle speculation, they were part of a larger, more calculated message. Someone, somewhere, didn't want this technology to succeed. And they were willing to use any means necessary to stop it. The following evening, as Ethan and Musk were wrapping up the meeting, they stepped outside into the cool night air. Musk turned to Ethan, his face more serious than usual. "Ethan," Musk began, his voice quiet but intense, "there's something I need to tell you. I've been getting word that there are some powerful forces who don't want this project to succeed. It's not just about competition anymore. There are people out there who are willing to do anything to stop us, and they'll target you if they think it'll slow us down." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What kind of forces? Who are they?" Musk's eyes were hard, a far cry from his usual visionary optimism. "We're talking about some of the largest energy corporations in the world. These aren't just your typical competitors. These are people who've controlled the market for decades. They'll stop at nothing to protect their profits. And right now, they see you as a threat." The weight of Musk's words hung in the air. Ethan felt his mind race. It was one thing to compete with other tech companies, but this was something else entirely. These weren't just business rivals. These were entrenched interests with immense power, and they would do anything to maintain their control. "Why are you telling me this now?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking slightly with the realization of what was at stake. Musk's expression softened for a moment. "Because you need to understand the world you're stepping into. You've got a brilliant mind, Ethan, and you're on the verge of changing everything. But that kind of change doesn't come without sacrifice. People will try to derail you, discredit you, or even steal your work." Ethan swallowed hard, his thoughts swirling. "What do we do?" Musk's lips curled into a slight smile. "We fight back. But we do it strategically. We build alliances, we keep our cards close, and we keep pushing forward. They're not going to stop us. Not now, not ever." Ethan nodded, a sense of determination flooding his veins. He had known this would be difficult, but he hadn't realized how deeply the stakes ran. This wasn't just about making a groundbreaking discovery, it was about surviving in a world where the biggest players were willing to play dirty to protect their interests. The path ahead wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about power, influence, and resilience. And Ethan wasn't about to back down. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he stared up at the ceiling, replaying everything Musk had said. The world of innovation wasn't just a place of discovery and progress, it was a battlefield, and he was right in the middle of it. Whoever had been behind the warning call now seemed clearer than ever. There were people out there who would stop at nothing to ensure that Ethan's ideas never saw the light of day. And while the fight for the future of energy was only just beginning, Ethan knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let anyone dictate what he could or couldn't accomplish. The battle was on, and Ethan wasn't going to lose. The following days felt like a blur to Ethan. The warning call, Musk's cryptic words, and the growing tension around the energy storage project weighed on his mind. Yet, despite all the pressure, he knew he couldn't let fear paralyze him. There was too much at stake, too many lives that could be changed for the better if they succeeded. Musk had insisted that they press on with the project, but the caution in his words never left Ethan. They were now in a race, not just to complete the technology, but to outpace those who would rather see it fail. However, it wasn't just Musk's warnings that made Ethan uneasy, it was the increasing number of strange occurrences that began happening around him. Small, subtle things at first. Emails that went missing. Meetings that were abruptly cancelled. Then, things escalated. It started one evening when Ethan received an anonymous package. It was a small, plain box, with no return address. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd expect to find on the doorstep of a high-tech prodigy like him. Inside the box, Ethan found a single, carefully folded piece of paper. The message was brief but chilling. "The world is not ready for your ideas. Turn back before it's too late." No signatures. No clues as to who had sent it. The coldness of the message sent a shiver down his spine. He didn't need to be told that this wasn't just a simple warning. This was a threat. Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the paper. The implications were clear. Whoever had sent it didn't just want him to stop his work, they wanted him to be silenced. Whoever was behind this would go to any lengths to ensure their control over the energy industry remained unchallenged. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Musk entered, his face grave. "Ethan, I need you to be alert," Musk said, his voice low but firm. "This project is about to get a lot more complicated. Someone's making moves behind the scenes." Ethan didn't need to ask what Musk meant. He held up the paper, showing it to him. Musk's eyes darkened when he saw the message. "I had a feeling. This is bigger than I thought. They're sending a message, all right. But we're not backing down." Ethan felt a surge of defiance. "Who are they, Musk? Who's behind this?" Musk's gaze shifted to the window, his thoughts momentarily lost in the city lights below. "It's not just one person, Ethan. It's a network. These are some of the most powerful people in the world. They own entire industries, have political influence, and they won't hesitate to protect their interests. They've controlled the energy sector for decades, and they're not going to let some kid from a small town change everything without a fight." Ethan's heart raced. It was a sobering reality, one that made him realize just how high the stakes were. "What do we do?" Musk turned back to him, his expression hardening. "We keep moving forward. We build the technology, and we make sure it's too big to fail. We take the fight to them, and we don't back down. But we also need to be smart. They're playing a dirty game, and we need to be ready." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. There was no turning back now. If they wanted to change the world, they'd have to face these powerful enemies head-on. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles, but giving up wasn't an option. The future of energy, and the future of the planet, depended on their success. The next day, Musk called a meeting with his top team. Ethan, along with several other key members of their operation, gathered in a sleek, modern conference room. As the door shut behind them, Musk wasted no time getting to the point. "We've received threats. Not just from anonymous sources, but from people with significant power in the energy sector," Musk said, his voice steady but firm. "I don't need to tell you how serious this is. But we're not backing down. We're going to fight. And we're going to need your help." Ethan looked around the room at the faces of Musk's team. Some of them appeared uneasy, but there was a shared determination in their eyes. These were people who had already dedicated their lives to changing the world, and now they were being asked to face the harsh reality of what it took to do that. "What exactly are we up against?" one of the engineers, a man named Marcus, asked. "Who's behind all this?" Musk's gaze darkened. "It's not just one person or one company. It's a whole network, some of the largest energy conglomerates in the world. These people have so much power that they control entire economies. If we go public with this technology, it'll disrupt everything they've built. And they're not going to let that happen without a fight." Ethan could sense the weight of the situation pressing on everyone in the room. There was no denying it, they were in over their heads. But there was something in Musk's eyes, something that told Ethan they weren't going to back down. They couldn't afford to. "Do you know who exactly is behind this?" Ethan asked. "Who's making these threats?" Musk didn't answer right away. He was clearly weighing his words carefully before speaking. "I don't know for sure, but I have a few suspicions. We're up against some very powerful individuals, and we can't afford to underestimate them. They have resources, connections, and the ability to move quickly. But we have something they don't, time. If we move fast enough, we can stay one step ahead." Ethan felt a mixture of dread and resolve. He had always known that changing the world wasn't going to be easy. But this was different. This wasn't just about innovation, it was about survival. The door to the conference room opened, and a figure stepped inside. It was Jessica, the financial expert who had been working closely with the team on securing funding and partnerships. Her face was tight, her expression unreadable. "Musk, Ethan," Jessica began, her voice sharp, "I just got word. The first strike has already been made." Ethan's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? What happened?" Jessica's eyes flickered to Musk, and then back to Ethan. "One of our major investors just pulled out. Without any explanation. No warning. Just like that." Musk's jaw clenched, but his demeanor remained calm. "They're making their move. We need to act fast." Ethan's mind raced. The first strike had been subtle, but it was a clear message: they weren't going to play fair. The forces aligned against them weren't just trying to slow them down, they were trying to crush them before they even had a chance to finish the project. But Ethan wasn't afraid. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The fight for the future had just begun, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him. The days that followed the sudden investor pullout were a blur of frantic calls and urgent meetings. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that every move they made was under the scrutiny of a powerful force determined to crush their progress. The first strike had been a financial one, but Ethan knew it wouldn't stop there. If the people behind this were willing to sabotage them so early in the process, they would stop at nothing to ensure that the energy storage project failed. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the pile of contracts and financial documents in front of him. The sudden withdrawal of such a major investor had thrown their entire funding strategy into disarray. Musk had already called in a few of his remaining allies to help secure alternative backing, but time was running out. The longer they remained vulnerable, the more likely it was that their enemies would strike again, and harder this time. Ethan's mind wandered back to the ominous message he had received in the mail. The handwriting was so carefully done, the paper pristine, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with him. It was almost too perfect. Whoever had sent it wanted to send a message, and they had gone to great lengths to make sure Ethan understood the gravity of the situation. As he leaned back in his chair, his phone buzzed with an incoming message from Musk. Ethan tapped on the screen, reading the brief note. "Meeting at 3 p.m. Get ready. Things are about to escalate." Ethan's stomach clenched. He had a feeling he knew what Musk meant by that. The enemy wasn't just threatening them anymore. They were actively working against them, using every resource they had to undermine the project. And if they didn't act quickly, their future, both personally and professionally, would be in jeopardy. At precisely 3 p.m., Ethan walked into the sleek conference room. Musk was already there, standing by the window, gazing out over the sprawling city below. The others were gathered around the table, their faces tight with worry. "Come in, Ethan," Musk said, turning to face him. "We have some things to discuss." Ethan nodded, taking a seat beside Jessica, who immediately handed him a tablet. "We've been doing some digging," she said, her voice low. "And I think we've uncovered something important." Ethan glanced at the screen, watching as Jessica tapped through a series of documents. "What have you found?" "It's a web of financial connections, unusual patterns in the way certain investors have moved their money," Jessica explained. "Some of them have connections to energy conglomerates that could have a vested interest in stopping us. And we think we've identified a few key players behind the scenes." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You mean there's a coordinated effort to sabotage the project?" Jessica nodded. "Exactly. And the fact that they've been able to pull strings so easily shows just how deep this goes. Whoever's behind this has influence everywhere: politics, business, and the media. They can shut us down in ways we can't even imagine." Musk let out a frustrated sigh. "I've known for a while that our opponents aren't just companies or investors, they're entire systems, entire infrastructures that rely on the status quo. But seeing this evidence, seeing how deeply rooted they are, it's terrifying." Ethan leaned forward, his mind racing. "So what do we do now?" We can't just sit here and wait for them to make the next move. Musk turned to face him. No, we can't. We have to act fast, and we have to be strategic. But more than that, we need to start thinking like them. They play dirty, and if we want to win, we need to play the same game. The room fell silent. Ethan understood what Musk was implying. They were no longer just innovators trying to change the world. They were players in a high-stakes game, one where the rules were written by the powerful forces who wanted to maintain control. And if they didn't play along, they wouldn't just lose the project, they'd lose everything. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly, using the information Jessica had uncovered to track down the key figures involved. Each lead they followed only seemed to reveal more layers of deception, more obstacles designed to keep them from reaching their goal. One evening, as Ethan was sifting through more documents in his office, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. The message was short. "You're running out of time. The next move will be devastating." Ethan froze. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was actively monitoring him, watching his every step. The threat was real, and it was closer than he thought. He immediately called Musk, and within minutes, they were both in a secure video call. Musk's face was drawn, his expression grim. "We need to get ahead of this," Musk said, his voice low. "The people behind this aren't just trying to shut down the project, they're trying to destroy us. If they can ruin your reputation, ruin your credibility, the tech itself won't matter." Ethan ran his hand through his hair. "How do we fight something like that? How do we go up against these kinds of people?" Musk looked at him, his gaze unwavering. "We expose them. We go public with what we've found, and we make it impossible for them to operate in the shadows anymore." Ethan nodded slowly. It was a risky move, putting everything they had worked for out in the open like that. But he knew it was their best chance to fight back. They had to shine a light on the darkness before it consumed them. The next few days were a blur of preparations. They contacted investigative journalists, secured legal counsel, and started drafting a public statement. Every move they made was calculated. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. If they were going to expose the people who were trying to destroy them, they needed to do it in a way that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. Finally, the day came. Musk, Ethan, and Jessica sat in front of cameras, a team of journalists ready to broadcast their message to the world. Ethan's heart raced. This was it, the moment that could make or break everything. As the cameras started rolling, Musk took the lead, his voice calm and confident. "We've been working on a revolutionary energy storage solution that has the potential to change the world," Musk began. "But we've encountered fierce resistance from powerful players in the energy sector who are willing to go to extreme lengths to prevent this technology from seeing the light of day." Ethan stepped forward, his expression serious but resolute. "We've uncovered evidence of a coordinated effort to sabotage our work. Some of the biggest players in the industry have used their influence to stop us at every turn. And today, we're exposing them to the world." The camera zoomed in on Ethan's face as he spoke, his words unwavering. "This isn't just about a technology. It's about the future of our planet. We won't let anyone stand in the way of progress." As the broadcast aired, Ethan could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. They were no longer just innovators. They were whistleblowers, exposing a conspiracy to the world. And now, there was no turning back. The broadcast was just the beginning. As soon as the world saw their story, the backlash was immediate and overwhelming. The news outlets exploded with coverage, some were sympathetic to their cause, others were skeptical, and a few outright hostile. The powerful figures they had accused of sabotaging their project were well known, and they weren't about to let a couple of tech innovators ruin their grip on the energy sector. Within hours of the broadcast, their phones were flooded with messages, mostly from reporters, but also from anonymous sources. Some messages offered support, while others were less friendly. Ethan's inbox was full of warnings, threats, and cryptic notes. The most chilling of all was a voicemail from an unknown number that simply said, "You've made a grave mistake. It's too late now." The hostility wasn't just online. Ethan and Musk both began to feel the ripple effects in their daily lives. Their companies started receiving cease and desist letters, their business partners pulled back in fear, and a few investors began demanding their money back. The energy conglomerates that had been named in the broadcast were swift to deny the accusations, calling them baseless and defamatory. But amidst all the chaos, Musk remained calm, more so than Ethan had expected. The tech mogul knew exactly how the game was played. He had faced similar challenges before, albeit on a different scale. Musk's reputation had always been built on pushing boundaries, but now it seemed like those boundaries were closing in on him, threatening everything he had worked for. Ethan, on the other hand, was struggling with the emotional weight of everything happening. He had expected resistance, of course, but nothing could have prepared him for the scope of the backlash. As much as he had believed in their project, he never realized just how much power their enemies had, and how ruthless they could be. 3 days after the broadcast, Musk called Ethan into his office. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of several monitors displaying data and financial reports. Musk's face was illuminated by the screen, his features cast in a harsh light. Ethan could see the toll the last few days had taken on him. "We need to talk," Musk said, his voice low. "Things are escalating quickly, and we can't afford to make any more mistakes." Ethan nodded, sitting down across from him. "What's happening?" "After the broadcast, we've seen a massive pushback. It's not just in the media, it's in every sector. These people are pulling every string they can, and we're starting to see the results." Musk turned to one of the monitors, pointing to a series of numbers. "The funding's drying up. Partners are backing out. The public perception is shifting. This isn't just a financial problem anymore, Ethan. It's a war, and we're on the front lines." Ethan's heart sank. "Is it too late to turn this around?" Musk's eyes flicked to him. "Not if we act fast. But we need a new strategy. We've made our move. Now, we need to make sure we're in control of the narrative. They're going to hit us with everything they've got, and we have to be ready." Ethan clenched his fists. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But how could they win when it seemed like the world was stacking the odds against them? The next few days were a blur of strategy sessions, meetings with crisis communication experts, and long hours spent on the phone with their remaining allies. Musk and Ethan realized that they needed to take the fight to a new front, one that would give them an advantage in the battle for public opinion. "Public perception is everything right now," Musk said as they sat around a conference table, surrounded by advisors and strategists. "If we can turn the public against the energy conglomerates, we can put pressure on them from every angle. We need to expose not just their financial manipulation but their ethical violations, their environmental impact, and their hidden agenda. The people need to see that this isn't just about us. It's about the future of the planet." Ethan nodded. "We need to show them the real stakes." Musk smiled slightly, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew how to play the game. "Exactly. We've been under the radar for too long. Now, we make sure everyone knows who they're dealing with." As the strategy unfolded, Ethan found himself becoming increasingly involved in the media campaign. He began appearing on talk shows, giving interviews, and speaking at public events. It was exhausting work, but it was necessary. He had become the face of their movement, the young genius at the heart of this revolution. The more he talked about the potential of their energy storage technology, the more people seemed to listen. But with every victory, there was a counterattack. The energy conglomerates were using their resources to discredit Ethan and Musk. They painted them as naive, reckless, even dangerous. Some went as far as calling them frauds and threats to global stability. The media was flooded with experts who questioned the feasibility of their technology, who downplayed the dangers of a rapidly shifting energy market. Ethan's resolve began to waver. How could they win when every step they took seemed to lead to more enemies? How could they overcome such an overwhelming force? That night, after a particularly grueling interview in which he had been grilled by reporters, Ethan found himself alone in his office. He stared out at the skyline, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. The energy project that had started as an idea, a dream, now felt like a battleground. He couldn't help but wonder if they had bitten off more than they could chew. Just then, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Musk. "We've got a new lead. This one might be the breakthrough we need. Meet me at the lab in an hour." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A new lead? After everything they had been through, was this the break they needed? He stood up from his desk, determined to push through the doubt. He wasn't about to give up now. The lab was buzzing with activity when Ethan arrived an hour later. Musk stood at the center of the room, surrounded by a team of engineers and researchers, all working diligently at various stations. The air was thick with tension and anticipation, but there was a spark in Musk's eyes that Ethan hadn't seen in days. "You made it," Musk said, his voice carrying an unusual excitement. "I think we've got something. A real breakthrough." Ethan's heart raced. He had been exhausted, but the thought of a breakthrough, something that could change everything, was enough to revive his spirit. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Musk gestured to the large screen at the front of the room, where a series of charts and graphs were displayed. "We've been tweaking the system, running simulations, and experimenting with some new algorithms for the energy storage solution. And I think we might have found a way to make it more efficient, more scalable, and, most importantly, more cost-effective than we originally thought." Ethan approached the screen, trying to process the data in front of him. The numbers were staggering. The efficiency of their energy storage technology had jumped significantly, and the cost of production was lower than they had anticipated. The breakthrough was revolutionary. It could potentially bring their vision of a sustainable, green energy future much closer to reality. "This could change everything," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. "If this works, we could have a product that's ready to scale in no time." Musk nodded, but his face was etched with concern. "There's a catch." Ethan furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Musk's gaze shifted to the other members of the team, who had gone silent. "We've seen this kind of potential before. But every time, we've run into roadblocks, financial, political, you name it. If we move forward with this, the backlash will be even stronger. These companies won't just sit back and watch us succeed. They'll come at us harder than ever." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. Musk was right. Their opponents wouldn't just let them disrupt the energy market without a fight. But this breakthrough, this new technology, could be the key to turning the tide in their favor. It was the leverage they needed to go on the offensive. "We need to move fast," Musk said, his tone now filled with urgency. "If we can lock in a solid production model, we can release this data to the public. It'll be a game changer, and it'll force these companies to rethink their strategy." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. "But we have to be careful. We don't want to give them more ammunition to use against us. We have to make sure everything is perfect before we go public." Jessica, who had been standing quietly in the back of the room, stepped forward. "Ethan's right. We need to ensure we have the proof. If we're going to expose these corporations for what they've done, we can't afford any mistakes. Every piece of evidence has to be airtight." Musk took a deep breath and then turned to the engineers. "Get to work on refining this. I want a prototype by next week, and I want the cost breakdown ready to present to investors. This is our shot, don't waste it." Over the next few days, the pace at the lab increased exponentially. Ethan barely slept, his focus entirely consumed by the breakthrough. The team worked around the clock to fine-tune the technology, ensuring that it was not only functional but also scalable. The efficiency improvements were real, and with the cost reductions, the project was now within reach of commercial viability. As the days wore on, the pressure mounted. Every step forward felt like a potential landmine. They were walking a fine line between innovation and sabotage. Any wrong move could push them into the line of fire again. But despite the mounting pressure, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The breakthrough felt too easy. Everything was falling into place so perfectly that it almost seemed like a trap. "What's going on in your head?" Jessica asked one evening as they reviewed the prototype's performance data. "You've been acting strange. More on edge than usual." Ethan looked up from the screen, his mind still racing. "I don't know. This breakthrough, it's huge, Jessica. But I can't shake the feeling that it's too good to be true. We've been up against so many obstacles that this sudden success feels suspicious." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you think someone might be setting us up?" Ethan hesitated, his gaze flicking to the team members in the room. "I don't know. I just feel like we're playing into someone else's hands. Maybe they've been letting us think we're winning, only to pull the rug out from under us at the last second." Jessica's face softened. "You're not wrong to be cautious, Ethan. But we've got to focus on what we can control right now. This breakthrough is real. It's our chance to turn everything around." Ethan nodded, but the nagging feeling remained. Something was off, and he couldn't shake the suspicion that there was more to the story than they were seeing. A week later, the prototype was ready for testing. The team gathered in the lab for the final demonstration. Musk stood at the front, his usual confidence tempered by the gravity of the moment. This could be the breakthrough that turned the tide in their favor, or the final piece of evidence that their enemies were planning something more devastating. Ethan and Jessica stood by the control panel, watching as the team ran their final series of tests. The system hummed to life, and the numbers began to scroll across the screen. The results were beyond promising. This was the energy storage solution they had dreamed of. But as the final test completed, something unexpected happened. The data went haywire. The numbers fluctuated wildly, and the system started to sputter. Within seconds, the entire prototype shut down. "Shut it off!" Musk yelled, rushing to the control panel. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the technicians scramble to power down the system. "What happened? It was working just fine yesterday." Jessica's face was pale. "I don't know. The numbers were perfect. But something's gone wrong." Musk turned to them, his expression hard. "This isn't a coincidence. Someone's pulling strings. We've been set up." Ethan's stomach churned as the implications sank in. The breakthrough they had worked so hard for, was it all a trap? Had their enemies been waiting for this moment, ready to strike when they were most vulnerable? This wasn't just a technical failure. It was sabotage. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Silence blanketed the lab like a fog. The prototype's sudden failure had shaken everyone to their core. Engineers stood frozen, staring at blank monitors and error codes that made no logical sense. Jessica was already on the phone with the cybersecurity team, her voice low but urgent. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he scrolled through the corrupted data. Everything about the shutdown screamed intentional interference. Not just a glitch. Not a bug. Someone had deliberately sabotaged their system. And that meant one horrifying possibility. There was a mole inside the team. "We need to shut everything down and isolate the network immediately," Jessica said as she returned. "Until we know how deep this goes, assume we're compromised." Musk nodded grimly. "Do it. Full lockdown." The lab went into emergency protocol. Secure systems were taken offline. Backups were copied to encrypted, offline drives. All team communications were moved to internal-only devices. Ethan sat in front of the darkened prototype, the air around him thick with betrayal. He looked over at the core diagnostic logs. Someone had bypassed the system remotely, right before the last test. A command line executed silently in the background, subtle enough to slip past a casual check, but now glaringly obvious. Who the hell would do this? Ethan muttered. They had to be here. They knew exactly when and how to hit us. Jessica came over and dropped a tablet next to him. On it was a list of recent login activities and system access timestamps. There's only one person who had system-level clearance at that time besides you and me, she said, voice cold. Miles. Ethan's head snapped up. Miles? The lead firmware engineer. Jessica nodded. He's been with us since day one. But something about his access patterns have been off for weeks. He's logged into restricted modules, made code changes that weren't documented. And get this, he called out sick this morning. Musk overheard from across the lab and walked over slowly. Bring him in. Quietly. No alerts. If he's working with our enemies, we don't tip him off. They set up a meeting that afternoon under the pretense of a private project review. When Miles walked in, the nervous flick of his eyes immediately told Ethan something was wrong. Musk closed the door behind him. Have a seat, Miles, Jessica said calmly. Miles hesitated, then sat across from them, glancing between the three of them. Something wrong? Ethan didn't bother easing in. You were the last one to access the system before it crashed. You edited code in the battery control loop and didn't log the changes. Want to tell us what that was about? Miles blinked slowly. I was troubleshooting some anomalies. Just cleaning up old code, trying to optimize. Jessica slid the tablet across the table. That's a lie. You executed a kill switch command disguised as a debug routine. It caused a controlled failure. We matched it to a remote signal routed through a proxy in Switzerland. Musk leaned forward. Who are you working for? Miles' facade cracked, just slightly. His shoulders slumped. His voice dropped to a low, resigned tone. You don't get it. This tech, it's not just disruptive, it's dangerous. You're messing with global energy markets. People will lose billions. Entire governments could collapse if oil dependence is suddenly obsolete. Ethan's jaw tightened. So what? You think that justifies destroying something that could save the planet? Miles looked directly at him, his voice eerily calm. I was protecting balance. This world isn't ready for what you're building. But some people are, people who understand how to manage change slowly, carefully. Jessica shot him a glare. Who are you working with? But Miles didn't answer. Musk made the call to have Miles removed from the building immediately. Legal and security teams would handle the rest. They had enough evidence to prove internal sabotage, and Miles had all but confessed. After Miles was gone, the lab was dead quiet. No one spoke for several minutes. Ethan stared at the floor, still trying to wrap his head around it. He was one of us, he finally said, bitterly. He helped build the core framework. I trusted him. Musk put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. This is what they do. They find people on the inside, exploit their fears, and turn them. It's not about personal loyalty, it's about power. Jessica walked back to her workstation, already coordinating with the engineering leads. We've got backups. Clean copies of the code from before his changes. We can roll back, verify, and start fresh. It'll take a few days. Ethan looked up. And then what? We just keep going like this didn't happen. Musk's eyes were steely. No, Ethan. We go harder. Now we know who we're fighting, and how far they're willing to go. That means we're close, too close for them to ignore. Later that night, Ethan walked alone through the darkened corridors of the lab. Screens glowed with code, test logs, and simulation models, proof that their work wasn't dead. Just delayed. The sabotage had hurt, yes, but it had also clarified something for him. This wasn't just a fight over innovation. It was a war over the future. And he wasn't afraid anymore. As he stood by the prototype, watching a clean boot sequence begin again, he whispered to himself. They wanted to break us from the inside. But all they did was make us stronger. The sabotage had left its mark, no question. Trust in the lab was shaken, and a low buzz of paranoia still clung to the team like fog. But after Miles was removed and the clean code reinstalled, something changed in the air. People weren't scared anymore, they were angry. Focused. Unified. And that shift. It mattered. Musk, Ethan, and Jessica called an all-hands meeting the next morning. Not in the sterile conference room this time, but in the open bay where the prototype had once failed. It stood behind them now, humming quietly, rebuilt, reborn. Ethan stepped forward first. What happened last week didn't break us. It woke us up. The team watched him in silence. They tried to take this down from the inside. They thought they could make us quit. But we're still here. And we're still building. From this point on, we move with eyes wide open. We lock every system, trace every change, and we trust, but verify. Then Musk stepped in, commanding the room with just his voice. This isn't just about energy anymore. It's about who controls the future. And we've got the chance, no, the responsibility, to make sure it's not the same old people pulling the strings. Let's finish what we started. The team erupted into quiet applause, not loud, but real. The tide was turning. By the end of the week, the prototype was not only back online, it was better. The security protocols had been hardened, the firmware rewritten, and the test results were even stronger than before. Every milestone they hit now felt personal, a defiant answer to everyone who tried to shut them down. Jessica had taken on the role of internal watchdog, monitoring activity logs, vetting new hires, even setting up encrypted channels for anonymous tips. No more moles, she said flatly. Not on my watch. Meanwhile, Musk had gone quiet publicly, but behind the scenes, he was pulling strings, big ones. He reached out to legacy partners, pitched private investors who wanted to remain off-grid, and even looped in a few international allies. They're watching, he told Ethan one night over a late dinner in the lab. They see what we're doing. But they're afraid to be the first to jump. So we make the first move impossible to ignore, Ethan replied. Musk grinned. Exactly. Ethan's own profile had blown up online after the sabotage scandal and whistleblower broadcast. Suddenly, people wanted to hear from him, not just about energy tech, but about disruption, innovation, and courage. He began writing essays, giving quiet interviews, posting behind-the-scenes updates that humanized the mission. His voice was different from Musk's, it was younger, more raw, but people listened. They liked seeing a 10-year-old genius who wasn't just brilliant but real, flawed, and fighting for something bigger than himself. One of his posts, "They tried to silence us. We turned up the volume," went viral, racking up millions of shares overnight. In it, he described what it felt like to be betrayed, to rebuild, and to keep going. At the bottom, he added one line that stuck with people. Innovation is hope with a backbone. Then came the surprise call. It was from a whistleblower, an anonymous source inside one of the energy conglomerates. Jessica took the call and listened carefully, then patched it through to Musk and Ethan. I can't say much over this line, the voice said. But what you're building? It's bigger than you think. And they're preparing to bury it. Not just through lawsuits or PR. They're preparing to take it off the map entirely. Who's they? Jessica asked. The voice hesitated. You know who. But there's a file, one that proves the connection between your sabotage and their top executives. It's hidden inside a proxy shell under the name, Project Groundglass. Get that file, and you'll have the smoking gun. Then the line went dead. Ethan, still processing the cryptic message, turned to Musk. If that's true, we could blow this wide open. Musk's eyes narrowed. And if it's not? Jessica leaned in. Then we treat it like it is. We go hunting. That night, the three of them began digging. Jessica spun up a secure search environment, and Ethan worked on decoding the name, Groundglass. It wasn't in any public database. But Ethan, with his knack for patterns, noticed something strange in one of the old backup logs from before Miles was ousted, an encrypted package that hadn't been flagged because it mimicked Tesla's diagnostic cache system. Ethan stared at it. He didn't just sabotage the system. He left something behind. Jessica cracked it open using a brute force algorithm with Musk's old admin credentials, and after hours of sweat and dead ends, there it was. A single file folder. Groundglass/. Inside, emails. Memos. A signed directive. Proof of illegal surveillance. Code fragments identical to those that caused their prototype to crash. And a payment trail that led directly to an executive at Petronex, one of the largest fossil fuel players in the world. It was the smoking gun. The room went silent. They had the evidence. The real proof. And if they played it right, they could bring down the entire shadow campaign trying to kill their dream. But with that knowledge came new danger. Jessica leaned back in her chair. The moment we release this, they won't just fight us in court. They'll come at us with everything they've got. This is war. Ethan exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. Then we better be ready. Musk smiled, not with arrogance, but purpose. Let's go rewrite the rules. The leak hit the internet like a meteor. Jessica had coordinated the release with a group of independent journalists and cybersecurity watchdogs. At exactly 9 a.m. Eastern, the full Groundglass archive, emails, payments, source code, everything, was made public. No press embargoes, no exclusives. Just cold, hard truth dropped into the world like a live grenade. The headlines followed within minutes. Energy giant linked to tech sabotage, Project Groundglass exposed. Whistleblower data confirms industry plot against clean energy breakthrough. Elon Musk and young prodigy vindicated by leaked files. It was a media firestorm. Every major outlet covered the story. Twitter, or X, depending on the day, exploded with hashtags like #GroundglassFiles, #EnergyWar, and #Ethan vs Goliath. Ethan watched it all from the control room, the same place where the prototype had failed just weeks earlier. But now, he wasn't watching systems crash. He was watching empires tremble. By noon, the public response was deafening. Protests broke out in front of Petronex offices worldwide. Energy executives went into hiding. Lawmakers demanded congressional hearings. Tech analysts called it the Enron moment for the fossil fuel industry. And as for Musk and Ethan, they weren't hiding. They were on camera. The two of them sat side by side in a live-streamed press conference, backed by the prototype now labeled GenCore 1. Ethan, in a sharp black hoodie and jeans, looked like every tech kid America had ever rooted for. Musk wore his usual black tee, cool and unbothered, like he already knew how this would end. Musk leaned into the mic. We didn't want this fight. We just wanted to build something better. Cleaner. Smarter. But when the truth threatens power, power fights back. Then Ethan spoke. His voice steady, young but unshaken. And that's okay. Because we're not scared of truth. We're not scared of change. And if they thought they could stop this by silencing a kid and a crazy billionaire, they clearly forgot who they were dealing with. The live chat on the stream went wild. Thousands of comments poured in by the second. Legends. Freakin' goosebumps. 10-year-old just nuked big oil on a Tuesday. Back at the lab, Jessica was coordinating with legal teams. The data had been verified, the connections confirmed. A class action lawsuit had already been filed by shareholders of Petronex and two other major corporations named in the groundglass files. And they weren't alone. Environmental groups, clean energy startups, tech companies. Even former energy execs now turned whistleblowers. One by one, they reached out with statements of support, and more damning documents. "This isn't a leak," Jessica said to Musk and Ethan later that night. "It's an avalanche. And it's just getting started." But even as the world turned in their favor, Ethan couldn't shake a strange feeling. It wasn't fear, he was past that. It was anticipation. Like the silence before a second storm. Musk noticed it too. "Enjoy this moment, Ethan," he said as they walked through the lab, engineers high-fiving and hugging around them. "This is what victory looks like. But it won't last forever." "You think they'll come back harder?" Ethan asked. Musk nodded. "They've got money, lobbyists, media assets, international connections. We just humiliated them. They're not going to take it lying down. So what do? We build. We scale. And we keep pushing. We don't just win the story, we win the future." That night, Ethan posted another message on social media. "They tried to bury us. They forgot we were seeds. #energy for all. #groundglass. Within minutes, it was trending across the globe. But deep inside a high-security office on the 51st floor of a corporate tower in Dubai, a small group of men watched Ethan's post with stone faces. One of them, older and graying, tapped his pen slowly against the desk. "We underestimated them," he said. Another man nodded. "The boy is more dangerous than we thought. And Musk, he's unkillable in the media." A third man leaned forward. "Then we don't go after them in the media." Silence. Then the older man smiled faintly, coldly. "Time to change tactics. No more denial. No more cover-ups. We let the world cheer for now. But when the dust settles..." He picked up a file marked, "Directive, Reclaim." "We remind them who really runs this world." The celebration didn't last long. 3 days after the groundglass files went public, the lab was hit with a precision-targeted cyber attack, one unlike anything they'd ever seen. It slipped past firewalls like water through cracks, disabling security systems, corrupting active simulations, and wiping several days' worth of prototype diagnostics. Jessica sprinted into the control room barefoot, still in her apartment hoodie, eyes blazing. "Kill the network. Right now. Everything goes dark." Ethan, already halfway through isolating core systems, slammed his fist on the emergency switch. The lab flickered and dropped into blackout mode, only red backup lights humming to life, like the place had gone into cardiac arrest. Musk arrived minutes later, no coat, no security detail, just rage. "What the hell happened?" he demanded. "They didn't go after our reputation this time," Jessica said. "They went after the brain." It took 72 hours to secure the breach and trace the attack's origin. What they found made Ethan's stomach churn: an assault routed through international military-grade infrastructure, disguised, compartmentalized, and carefully scrubbed of origin. But it was clear, this wasn't some rogue hacker. It was state-sponsored. Jessica looked at the digital forensics report and dropped it on the desk. "They're using nation-state tools now. They've moved out of corporate warfare and into global escalation." Musk shook his head. "We thought we were fighting oil tycoons. Turns out, we've been poking the geopolitical bear." Ethan rubbed his temples. "If governments are involved now, how do we even keep going?" Musk turned to him, dead serious. "We go dark. No more public updates. No press. No leaks. Just us and the tech. We finish the job behind closed doors." Phase 2 of their project, mass prototyping and deployment, was relocated to a secure desert facility in Nevada, a location known only to a handful of core team members. Musk called it the Forge. No internet access, no outside devices, and biometric-only entry. This isn't paranoia, he told Ethan. It's survival. Inside the Forge, progress accelerated. Away from the cameras and noise, the team could focus. Ethan rewrote part of the energy distribution algorithm from scratch. Jessica integrated new quantum encryption layers into every piece of the software. They weren't just building a product now, they were building a shield. But the silence from the outside world didn't last long. One night, as they ran diagnostics in the Forge, a breaking news alert flashed across a secure tablet. Tesla exec accused of data theft in major federal investigation. Jessica swore under her breath. They're trying to frame us. Within hours, more headlines surfaced. Anonymous source claims Musk's tech could collapse national grid. FBI investigating alleged espionage by young prodigy. Senate demands inquiry into Musk-Ethan alliance. It was a coordinated smear campaign. They're trying to discredit the entire project before it launches, Ethan said. Turn us from heroes to threats. And they're using every lever they've got, Jessica added. Political, media, law enforcement. This is full spectrum. Musk didn't flinch. Good. That means we're winning. In the following days, strange things started happening. One team member's family received anonymous threats. Private security contractors spotted surveillance drones near the Forge perimeter. A truck delivering components was intercepted and rerouted without explanation. It wasn't just digital now. The war had come to the real world. This is it, Jessica said in a hushed voice to Ethan one night. We're living inside the pressure cooker. They want us to panic. To make a mistake. Ethan looked at her, calm but sharp. Then we don't. But even Ethan wasn't immune to the weight. That night, he sat in the bunkhouse, staring out into the desert. The stars above felt colder than usual, like even the sky was watching. He thought about his parents. About the classmates who used to call him a freak. About the first time he picked up a screwdriver and cracked open an RC car just to see what made it tick. And now he was here. 10 years old. Leading the most dangerous energy revolution in history. He whispered into the darkness. Why does doing the right thing feel like standing in front of a train? From the hallway behind him, Musk's voice echoed quietly. Because you're standing between the world and the people trying to steal its future. The next morning, the team gathered in the central build chamber of the Forge. Musk walked in, holding a small black case. Inside, the final chip, the command core that would make Gen Core 1 autonomous, secure, and ready for mass production. We're locking this in today, he said. The world may be coming for us. But when they get here. He looked to Ethan. We'll already be gone. The desert wind howled outside the Forge, hurling sand against the titanium walls like nature itself was warning them to turn back. Inside, everything was still. Focused. Tense. This was it. No more simulations. No more prototypes. No more second chances. Today, they would attempt the first full-scale activation of Gen Core 1, the world's first decentralized clean energy core, capable of powering entire cities off-grid, off-politics, and off fossil fuels. They called it Project Prometheus behind closed doors. Because, like the myth, they were stealing fire from the gods. Musk stood before the team, a tight-knit group of engineers, cyber specialists, and security pros who had weathered months of sabotage, smear campaigns, and threats. His tone was quiet, almost reverent. We've come to the edge, he said. And beyond this point, there's no turning back. When we activate this core, we make the technology real. Tangible. Unstoppable. Jessica tapped a tablet and projected the launch sequence onto the wall, an elegant line of code that would run the bootloader for the clean power matrix. This isn't just a button press, she added. This is us kicking down the last door. Ethan stood between them, his expression calm but burning with purpose. Let's light it up. The activation chamber was built deep beneath the forge, insulated, shielded, and surrounded by redundant failsafes. The core itself sat in the center of the room like a sleeping heart, surrounded by glass, metal, and silence. As the countdown began, Ethan stood at the primary console. Jessica watched power flux levels while Musk monitored environmental feedback. Final checklist green, she said. Magnetic containment stable, Musk added. Ethan's finger hovered over the enter key. Launching Prometheus, now. Click. The silence was deafening for the first 2 seconds. Then a low hum began to rise, like a choir made of circuitry and plasma. Lights danced along the floor. The room vibrated, but not with chaos, with power. Smooth, balanced, and alive. On the main display, energy output climbed rapidly. 5 megawatts. 20, 100. The numbers kept rising. Jessica gasped. We're hitting grid-level power in 60 seconds. Ethan checked the real-time distribution model. We could power Los Angeles for 3 days straight, with just this prototype. Musk smiled slowly. We didn't just launch Prometheus. We ignited a revolution. But then. Warning, external network breach attempt detected. The room's lights dimmed for a half second. Everyone froze. Someone's pinging our comm relays, Jessica snapped. They found us. Are we traced? Musk asked sharply. No. The Forge's physical network is isolated. They're just knocking. Loudly. But it didn't stop. Dozens of IPs. Global proxies. Military-grade pings. Jessica quickly shut down all external receivers. They were trying to jack the signal. Hijack control. Did they get anything? Ethan asked. Jessica shook her head. Not unless they can read a hard drive sitting in my back pocket. The team rushed to initiate offline backups. Musk pulled up a secure uplink to one of SpaceX's low-orbit satellites, not to broadcast energy data, but to send out an encoded message to allies, quietly signaling the launch's success. Meanwhile, Ethan slid a hard case onto the table. Inside, a portable drive with the full GenCore source code, encrypted and segmented. If anything happens to us, he said, this gets out. No matter what. Jessica gave him a look. You planning to go somewhere? I'm planning to win, he replied. And that means we start thinking 10 moves ahead. Later that night, the team gathered outside under the stars, where a field of silent solar nodes buzzed faintly with redirected Prometheus energy. They were officially off-grid. Self-powered. Independent. The lab now lived on its own breath. Tomorrow, we begin manufacturing, Musk said. We don't sell it. We give it. To the people who need it most. Jessica nodded. Refugee camps. Blackout zones. Schools in rural Africa. We go where power doesn't. Ethan turned to them, his eyes full of fire. And when they try to shut us down again? Musk smirked. We'll be everywhere. At that very moment, thousands of miles away, in a secret meeting room beneath a diplomatic consulate, a group of world leaders stared grimly at a data feed showing energy output from an unidentified facility in Nevada. He actually did it, one of them said. Another whispered, and now it's only a matter of time. On the table, a new folder appeared. Directive, Phoenix. The label beneath it. If we can't stop the fire, we must control the ashes. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The world hadn't just taken notice of GenCore 1, it was demanding it. Musk, Ethan, and Jessica didn't waste time basking in the success of their launch. They were busy scaling up production, securing new partnerships, and solidifying their network of allies. The energy revolution they had ignited wasn't a distant future anymore. It was happening, right now, and it was unstoppable. Across the globe, energy-rich nations scrambled to maintain control. They'd underestimated the sheer force of what had been unleashed. Nations with vast oil and gas reserves, countries that had long operated with a stranglehold on global energy markets, were suddenly in jeopardy. It was as if the world had collectively realized that the power to fuel their economies didn't have to come from a pipeline, a well, or a refinery. It could come from a small, autonomous core, a core that fit in a backpack and could power an entire city for a week. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Venezuela, who had relied on fossil fuel exports to fund their economies, found themselves in the midst of an existential crisis. Their political and economic power was slipping away. Behind closed doors, at oil barons' tables and in gilded government offices, panic set in. Are we going to just sit back and let this happen? A Russian minister asked during a high-stakes meeting, his voice low but urgent. This could destroy us. Across from him, a Saudi prince clenched his jaw. The Americans have always had a way of destabilizing our markets. We won't allow them to get away with this. But the global power shift wasn't limited to governments. Even major energy corporations, some of the richest and most powerful in the world, felt the ground shaking beneath them. Petronex, still reeling from the ground glass leaks, tried to respond, but the crisis was bigger than they'd anticipated. They couldn't just bury it. They tried lobbying. They tried buying out smaller clean energy firms. But the Gencore revolution was unstoppable, moving too fast for any one corporation or government to control. Back in the States, Musk's team was working relentlessly to scale Gencore 1's production. They partnered with factories in Silicon Valley to build smaller, more efficient models, and began distributing them to schools, hospitals, and rural communities. Musk had always been a believer in building not just for profit, but for humanity's future. He saw this as his greatest work, more important than Tesla, more important than SpaceX, even more important than his controversial endeavors with Twitter. This was about saving the planet. By the end of the month, the team was ready to roll out the first public distribution. It was time to bring the revolution to the masses. Once these start going to homes and businesses, we can't stop it, Musk said during a video call with Ethan and Jessica. The market will take care of the rest. Once people see they don't have to rely on fossil fuels, they won't go back. Ethan was sitting in front of the control board, his hands resting on the surface. Do you think they'll come for us again? He asked. Musk didn't hesitate. They'll try. But we won't be alone anymore. The people will fight back. While the team prepped for the mass rollout, the smear campaigns from global corporations and governments reached a new level of intensity. Protests erupted in cities across the world, orchestrated by shadowy figures and funded by the very organizations whose futures were most threatened by clean energy. In Washington, D.C., senators and lobbyists aligned with the oil industry called for immediate congressional hearings to investigate the rise of unregulated energy monopolies. News outlets amplified fear-mongering headlines, warning the public that Gencore 1 could destabilize entire grids, cause massive job losses, and lead to dangerous dependence on untested technology. It's chaos, Jessica said one evening as she sifted through the latest round of media attacks. They're trying to turn the public against us. They're even dragging up the old conspiracy theories about Musk and me. Ethan wasn't fazed. Let them talk. The numbers speak for themselves. Musk leaned over to see the latest reports. They can't stop us with words anymore. The truth is out, and the world can see it. People will choose freedom over fear. The day of the first public Gencore distribution arrived. A massive shipment of the cores, now dubbed Gencore 2.0, was delivered to over 100 locations worldwide, including schools in Africa, clinics in South America, and disaster relief areas in Southeast Asia. Each location received enough energy to power entire communities off the grid for weeks, and for the first time, people in developing regions had access to stable, clean, and reliable energy. The reaction was immediate. In rural Kenya, the lights flickered on for the first time in a decade. In the outskirts of São Paulo, Brazil, local hospitals received enough power to run life-saving equipment. In Puerto Rico, which had suffered from years of power outages, GenCore 2.0 brought an end to the island's dependency on fragile, expensive energy imports. The news spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with stories and videos of people celebrating the arrival of GenCore technology. For the first time in history, power was no longer a privilege, it was a right. However, while the public's response was overwhelmingly positive, the backlash from the establishment was as fierce as ever. The same world leaders who had once sought to regulate Musk's space endeavors were now turning their attention to the GenCore threat. The international community convened emergency meetings, trying to devise a strategy to counter the growing wave of decentralization. As they met in closed-door summits, global energy giants worked behind the scenes to buy off smaller clean tech companies, hoping to slow the tidal wave of change. But the most significant challenge was from within the United States. Washington lobbyists, backed by the very corporations trying to preserve the status quo, attempted to pass legislation that would force Musk and his team to cease their global distribution. Musk wasn't blind to this. "We're at war now," he said one night, pacing in front of a monitor displaying international news. "But it's a war of ideas. And we're winning. They can't stop what we've started." He turned to Ethan, who had been unusually quiet. "You okay?" Musk asked. Ethan, still only 10 years old, looked up. His expression was one of determination, but there was something else in his eyes. A recognition of the magnitude of what they were really up against. "We're not just fighting corporations anymore," Ethan said. "We're fighting the way the world works." Musk smiled, proud and resolute. "And we're going to win." As the days stretched into weeks, the pressure mounted. The launch of GenCore 2.0 had set off a firestorm that no one could contain. While the world celebrated the arrival of a new era in energy, the powers that be had only one objective: to stop it, no matter the cost. The phone calls came in fast and furious. Musk's office was a non-stop stream of urgent messages from government officials, lobbyists, and corporate executives who had one thing in common: they were all desperate to rein in the power of GenCore. But Elon Musk was never one to back down. "We're not just disrupting industries anymore," Musk said, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of the battle they faced. "We're upending entire governments. And they're not going to just roll over." Ethan, sitting across the table in the Forge's command center, nodded. Despite the gravity of the situation, his youthful optimism remained unshaken. "But we've already won. The tech works. The people want it." Jessica leaned over the table, her eyes narrowed with focus. "The truth is, they don't care about what the people want. They care about control. If they can't control the energy, they can't control the world." Musk exhaled slowly. "That's the thing about change. It's like a forest fire, no matter how hard you try to control it, eventually it burns its way through everything in its path. It's time to let it burn." In Washington, the Senate moved to enact emergency measures that would outlaw the open distribution of GenCore technology. The bill, known as the Energy Control Act, was rushed through committee and into the legislative floor with surprising speed. "It's a direct assault on innovation," Musk said during an emergency meeting with his team. "They're not even pretending anymore. They want to regulate us into oblivion." Jessica tapped the screen in front of her, pulling up a list of major lobbying firms working behind the scenes to push the bill forward. "This is bigger than just energy. They're trying to kill everything we've built." Musk's eyes were cold, but determined. "Then we make it impossible to ignore." The team knew what they had to do. The next move wasn't just about defending GenCore, it was about ensuring that no one could ever reverse the progress they had made. Ethan was the first to suggest it. "We should go global," he said, his young face serious. "If they can't stop us from operating in the US, then we go where they have no control. Musk smiled, a hint of admiration in his eyes. I like how you think. It's not just about fighting the battle, we need to take it to them. We need to shift the center of power. They decided to focus on building new alliances with countries and corporations who were already moving away from traditional energy sources. Nations in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East that were previously dependent on oil began to see the economic and environmental benefits of decentralized energy. In just a few weeks, a coalition of over 40 countries had signed agreements with Musk's team, allowing for the mass distribution of GenCore technology. These nations not only saw the immediate benefits of clean, reliable energy, but they also understood the geopolitical power they would wield by embracing the technology. But the fight was far from over. Musk and his team still had to contend with the looming threat of the Energy Control Act, a bill that could cripple their operations in the United States. If it passed, it would not only restrict the production and distribution of GenCore, but it would also open the door for corporate entities to seize control of the clean energy market. The battle came to a head 1 week later, in the heart of Washington, D.C. Musk, Jessica, and Ethan stood in the halls of Capitol Hill, watching as senators filed into the chambers. The vote on the Energy Control Act was scheduled for the following morning. It was crunch time. We have to stop this, Musk said quietly, his gaze fixed on the hustle of politicians around him. We can't let them win. Ethan, despite the weight of the moment, looked calm. He had been trained in ways few could comprehend. The world was shifting beneath his feet, but he was ready. He had known from the beginning that this moment would come, the point where the fight would no longer be about just building tech, but about securing a future for everyone. We've done everything we can, Ethan said. Now it's up to the people. If they want this, they'll find a way. The vote began the next day, and the tension in the air was palpable. News outlets were broadcasting live, covering every second as senators cast their votes. The world was watching. The first few votes went as expected, heavily in favor of the bill. But then, something unexpected happened. Protests erupted outside the Capitol. Citizens from across the country, many of them fueled by the energy revolution that had begun with GenCore, gathered in mass numbers, chanting for the preservation of clean energy. They stood firm, blocking entrances to the Capitol and raising their voices against the legislation. The protests were peaceful, but their message was clear: the people wouldn't allow the government to take away their future. Musk stood in front of the Capitol building, watching the crowds gather. This is it, he said. If we lose, we fight again. If we win, the world will never be the same. By late afternoon, the vote came to a head. The final tally was close, far closer than anyone had expected. In the end, the Energy Control Act was defeated, and the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. But the victory didn't just come from the vote. It came from the people who had shown up to fight for their future. It came from the collective power of those who believed that energy should be a right, not a commodity controlled by a few. As they gathered in the war room after the vote, the team exchanged quiet congratulations. But Musk's face was serious. This is just the beginning, he said. We've won this round, but the fight for the future isn't over. Ethan nodded. The real work starts now. The dust had barely settled from the legislative battle when a new storm began to brew. The defeat of the Energy Control Act was a victory, but Musk and his team knew it wasn't enough. While the political threat had been neutralized for the time being, a far more insidious challenge was already emerging. It started with a call in the middle of the night, a call that Musk almost didn't answer, thinking it was just another sleepless, paranoid moment in a string of many. But this one was different. It was Jessica, her voice tight with urgency. Elon, something's wrong. Musk straightened in his bed, instantly alert. What's happening? I've been going through the data logs for the past few hours, and there's something I didn't notice before, Jessica said. I think someone's inside our system. The news hit Musk like a jolt of cold electricity. The very infrastructure they had spent years building, the security, the redundancy, the encryption, had been breached. And it wasn't just a small vulnerability. It was a backdoor. A pathway that could allow someone with the right access to completely shut down or manipulate their entire network. Run a full diagnostic on all systems, Musk ordered. Lock everything down. Jessica's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up logs from every corner of their infrastructure. She didn't have to say it aloud, but they all knew what it meant. Someone's been feeding false data into the energy distribution system, she muttered, scanning the results. And not just small tweaks, big changes. Like someone is trying to destroy the reputation of GenCore, to make it seem unstable. Musk's eyes hardened. Who would do something like that? There's only one answer, Jessica said. Someone on the inside. As the team scrambled to trace the source of the breach, the reality of what was happening became clear: they had an enemy within their own ranks. Someone had infiltrated their organization, someone who knew the ins and outs of their technology, someone who had access to the heart of the operation. But who could it be? The team was small, trusted. Everyone had been carefully vetted, and their loyalty was unquestioned. Or so they thought. Musk paced the floor of the command center, deep in thought. We've been too open, too trusting. This is a billion-dollar operation, and we let our guard down. The question is, who would want to sabotage us? Ethan, who had been unusually quiet, looked up from the corner. The same people who want to stop the energy revolution. They know the stakes. And now they're getting desperate. Jessica shook her head. But it's someone in the inner circle. Whoever did this had direct access to our systems. I'm checking everyone's access logs, but there are no signs of unauthorized entry. Whoever is doing this is good. A chill ran through Musk as he realized the full extent of the situation. We've been compromised. But we don't have the luxury of waiting. We need to figure out who, and fast. The investigation unfolded slowly. Trust that had once been automatic began to fray as suspicions crept in. The tight-knit team was now looking at each other with doubt, questioning everything they thought they knew about the people they'd worked with for years. Every conversation felt charged, every email scrutinized, every movement carefully watched. Jessica was the first to find something telling, an encrypted message embedded in the data logs, one that didn't belong. A string of characters that seemed like nonsense at first but was clearly a communication channel. A hidden message. Someone's been leaking our information, she said grimly. We have a mole. The situation was delicate. With the global stakes of their mission and the growing pressure from governments, Musk knew that exposure of any kind, especially this kind, could bring everything crashing down. If the wrong people found out about the betrayal, the whole project could implode. It was time for a radical step. Musk called for an emergency meeting with his inner circle, Jessica, Ethan, and a few others who were still loyal. They had to decide what to do with the information they had. Do we trust this team? Musk asked, his voice sharp. We don't have a choice, Jessica said. We have to trust each other now more than ever. Whoever did this is playing a dangerous game. But the system's compromised, Musk pressed. If the wrong person is in this room, the whole project could be destroyed from within. The reputation of GenCore, our credibility, everything is on the line. As the team deliberated, Ethan, as always, was the first to come up with a solution. We can't just hope it fixes itself. We need to find the leak. We need to track down who did this and remove them, fast. Musk paused, considering his words carefully. How do we even know who to trust? We start with the basics, Ethan said. Whoever it is, they're likely using the same pattern to cover their tracks. We analyze access points, employee behavior, and unusual communications, anything that doesn't fit. Jessica nodded. I'll start with the internal comms. If someone's been leaking intel, they'll have slipped up somewhere. We just need to find it. The next few days were tense, the team working around the clock to trace the mole within their ranks. They analyzed communications, scrutinized every bit of data that had been sent, and reviewed every access point. Finally, they found it. A familiar name appeared in the logs, one that hadn't raised any alarms before: Dr. Victor Calder, a senior engineer who had been working with Musk from the beginning. He was the last person anyone had suspected, but the evidence was clear: he had been siphoning sensitive information for months, feeding it to an unknown party. Musk's expression darkened as he read the decrypted message: "The core must fail. They must never know what you found." Victor had been working for the enemy all along. A corporate spy embedded within their ranks, part of a larger conspiracy to shut down GenCore before it could change the world. "What do we do now?" Jessica asked, the weight of the discovery settling in. Musk's gaze hardened. "We make sure this never happens again. We don't just cut ties with Victor, we bring the whole operation down. This is war, and we're playing for keeps." As they moved to confront Victor, the team knew that they had crossed a new threshold. The fight for clean energy was no longer just against governments or corporations, it had now become a battle against betrayal itself. And Musk wasn't about to lose. The discovery of the mole had rattled the team, but there was no time to waste. With the enemy at their doorstep, Musk and his closest allies knew that the battle was no longer just about technological advancement, it had evolved into a fight for their very survival. Victor Calder's betrayal wasn't just a personal loss. It was a stark reminder of the high stakes they were all playing with. The forces arrayed against them were vast and powerful, and they now knew that no one was safe from infiltration. But there was no turning back. "Do you think he was acting alone?" Ethan asked as the team gathered in the strategy room, going over the details of their next move. The walls were lined with monitors showing data feeds from all over the world, updates on GenCore systems, and the ever-growing list of global allies. Musk leaned over the table, his face lined with exhaustion but still sharp. Victor wasn't just a mole. He's been working with someone big. It's not just a matter of stopping him. We need to find out who's pulling the strings. Jessica's fingers flew over the keys, pulling up Victor's background, digging through encrypted files and obscure records. She stopped suddenly, her gaze fixed on the screen. "Wait," she muttered, scanning again. "There's a name here, John Harrison. He's listed in multiple financial transactions related to Calder. And there's something else. He's linked to the same corporate lobbying firms that were behind the Energy Control Act. This isn't just about sabotage, it's a conspiracy." Musk stood up straight, his eyes narrowing with intent. "Then we have our next target." But the plan to confront Harrison, a shadowy figure in the world of corporate espionage, was not without its risks. Harrison wasn't just a businessman, he was a well-connected player with ties to governments, intelligence agencies, and private military contractors. His network spanned continents, and it was clear he was willing to go to extreme lengths to protect his interests. As the team made preparations, they couldn't ignore the looming question: how far was Harrison willing to go to stop them? "Do you think he'll strike back?" Jessica asked as she examined the team's security measures. Musk's face was unreadable. "I don't just think it. I know it. He's not the kind to leave things half-finished. If we're going after him, we have to be ready for anything." The team went over their plan meticulously, strategizing how they would track Harrison and get to the heart of his operation. It wasn't just about taking down a few operatives, it was about cutting off the head of the snake. They needed information, leverage, and, most importantly, speed. "We'll hit his financial connections first," Musk said. "Disrupt his money flow, and we'll force him into a corner. That's when we'll make our move." The next few days were a blur. Musk and Jessica traveled to Europe, while Ethan worked with the rest of the team to monitor Harrison's movements through their network of allies. Harrison's empire wasn't just about money, it was about control. And Musk knew that breaking his grip on the world's energy supply would expose him for what he truly was, a puppet master behind a facade of legitimacy. They moved fast, using everything at their disposal, from private networks and off-the-record contacts to coded messages and hidden financial transactions. Each new piece of intel brought them closer to the truth. But just as they were closing in on Harrison, something unexpected happened. It was a late-night meeting when Musk received the call. "Mr. Musk," the voice on the other end was smooth, almost too calm. "You don't know me, but I think we have a mutual interest in the outcome of your little project." Musk's heart rate quickened. This wasn't an ordinary call. "Who is this?" Musk demanded, his tone icy. "You can call me a friend," the voice replied cryptically. "And I have information that could change everything for you. But you'll need to meet me. Now." The line went dead. The meeting was set in an old warehouse on the outskirts of Zurich. Musk, Jessica, and a small team arrived under the cover of night, the tension in the air palpable. They weren't sure what to expect, but they knew it wouldn't be good. They entered cautiously, weapons discreetly in hand, ready for a confrontation. The warehouse was empty save for a single figure standing under a dim light. The man was tall, wearing a suit that seemed slightly out of place in the grimy surroundings. He smiled when he saw them enter, but there was something cold about his expression. "You're Elon Musk," the man said. "The great innovator, the disruptor. You've made a lot of enemies." Musk didn't flinch. "Who are you?" The man stepped closer, his smile widening. "That's not important. What's important is this: you're on the verge of doing something that will disrupt the very fabric of society. Energy, transportation, communications. You're playing in a game far bigger than you realize. And you're losing." Jessica's hand tightened on her weapon. "What do you want?" The man's eyes flickered with amusement. "What I want is simple. I want you to stop. I want you to turn off GenCore. Walk away. If you don't, the consequences will be severe." Musk's eyes narrowed. "Who sent you?" The man's smile faltered, his eyes flickering with barely contained malice. "You've got a big target on your back now, Musk. Every move you make is being watched. If you think you can take on Harrison and win, you're gravely mistaken. He's just the beginning. And there's nowhere you can hide." The weight of his words hit Musk like a hammer. The shadowy forces against them weren't just powerful, they were everywhere. And now, they were directly threatening the future Musk had been building for years. The meeting was over quickly. Musk and his team retreated, but the implications of the encounter stayed with them. "We've crossed a line," Musk said quietly as they sped back to their temporary base. "We can't stop now, though. The moment we turn back is the moment they win." Back at the command center, the team braced for the worst. Every corner seemed to harbor new threats, every new piece of intel only confirmed their worst fears. They were up against forces that had resources, influence, and reach far beyond what they had imagined. Musk stood by the window, staring out at the city below, his mind racing. "We're in the firestorm now," he said softly. "But we're not backing down." The night was silent, but beneath the calm, the storm was approaching. Every move Musk and his team made was now under scrutiny. Their every step, every decision, every interaction was being monitored by unseen eyes. The world had turned against them, and the battle was about to enter its final phase. There was no going back now. The meeting with the mysterious man had left a bitter taste in Musk's mouth. The warning was clear: stop now or face the consequences. But Musk wasn't the type to back down when faced with a threat. In fact, it only made him more determined to see this mission through. "Where do we go from here?" Jessica asked, her voice low, as she and the team gathered in the war room, staring at a map of the world with their targets marked in red. Musk studied the map for a long moment, his mind working through the logistics. "We go after Harrison. We don't stop until he's in custody. He's the one pulling the strings, and we need to take him down before he can do any more damage." Ethan, who had been quietly analyzing data from their previous missions, nodded. "We've got a couple of leads on his whereabouts, but it's not going to be easy. He's slippery. He's already made it clear he has a vast network of resources. Getting to him is going to be a fight, one we might not win. Musk met Ethan's gaze with a steely determination. Then we make it our fight. We've come this far, and we're not stopping now. The final plan was set into motion. Musk, Jessica, and a select few members of the team flew to Paris, where Harrison was rumored to be hiding, surrounded by an army of private security and allies. Their mission was simple: find Harrison, neutralize his operations, and end the conspiracy once and for all. The tension on the plane was palpable. The team knew that their chances of success were slim. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing a formidable opponent. But Musk wasn't a man who feared odds. He had built his empire on defying the impossible, and now wasn't the time to let fear take hold. "We'll get through this," Musk said, breaking the silence. "We always do." The night they arrived in Paris, they hit the ground running. They quickly established a network of contacts, using their allies in the intelligence community to track Harrison's movements. The city's streets were teeming with people, but behind the scenes, things were far darker. Harrison's operatives were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, watching their every move. Jessica hacked into the city's surveillance system, while Ethan and the others set up a perimeter around the building where Harrison was thought to be staying. Time was of the essence. They couldn't afford to wait for Harrison to make his move. They had to act first. Hours passed in silence, the air thick with tension as the team waited for the perfect moment to strike. They watched Harrison's movements carefully, every meeting, every phone call, every interaction, until they had everything they needed. Finally, they had their opening. A convoy of black SUVs left a high-end hotel, and with it, Harrison's men. They were on the move. The team made their move quickly, using the chaos of Paris at night to slip into the convoy's path. Musk's heart raced as they approached the convoy, the plan now in full swing. They had to neutralize Harrison's security, extract him, and get the hell out of there before anyone could trace their steps. But as the convoy pulled into a secluded warehouse district, things went south in an instant. Gunfire erupted from the shadows. The team ducked for cover, their training kicking in as they returned fire. The air was thick with the sound of bullets and the smell of gunpowder. Musk's heart pounded in his chest as he shouted orders to his team, but it was chaos. Harrison's men were everywhere, well-trained, well-armed, and relentless. "Move! Move!" Jessica shouted, pulling Musk behind cover as a bullet ricocheted off the nearby wall. They couldn't stay there long. The team pushed forward, guns drawn, knowing that they were on borrowed time. They had one shot at this, one shot to end the conspiracy. But just as they neared the warehouse where they believed Harrison was hiding, an explosion rocked the street, sending debris flying in all directions. Musk's ears rang, and for a moment, he was disoriented. "We've got to move, now!" Ethan shouted, pulling Musk to his feet. It was all falling apart. But they couldn't give up. They had no choice but to push forward. Inside the warehouse, the final confrontation awaited. The team moved through the dark corridors, the tension mounting with every step. They knew that they were close, Harrison was here, and they were going to bring him down. Finally, they found him. He was standing in a dark room, flanked by his personal bodyguards, his expression unreadable. "Well, well, Elon Musk," Harrison said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I didn't think you'd make it this far. But you should know, it's already too late. You've lost." Musk's eyes locked with Harrison's, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. "It's never too late," Musk said, his voice steady. "You're finished, Harrison. This ends tonight." The standoff was tense. Musk's team had Harrison surrounded, but his men were well-trained and well-armed. The fight that ensued was nothing short of brutal. Bullets flew, and the air was filled with the sound of gunfire and shouts. But in the end, it was Musk and his team who emerged victorious. Harrison was arrested, his empire crumbling around him. The conspiracy was exposed, and the people behind the plot to stop GenCore were brought to justice. As they stood over Harrison's cuffed form, Musk felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. It was over. The battle had been long, but they had won. But victory came at a cost. The damage had already been done. The world would never be the same, and neither would Musk. "I don't know if I can go back to what we were," Jessica said, her voice quiet as they surveyed the damage around them. Musk shook his head. "We can't. This changes everything." But one thing was certain, GenCore had survived. And with it, the hope of a new world, one where clean energy could replace the corrupt systems of the past, still burned bright. The morning after the storm had passed, the sun rose over a world forever changed. Musk and his team stood at the precipice of a new era. The battle with Harrison and the shadowy figures pulling the strings had been fierce, but now, with Harrison's arrest and the exposure of his network, the path forward seemed clearer. But the weight of what they had just endured wasn't something that could be shaken off in a single night. The fallout from the battle, the lives lost, the countless obstacles they had overcome, these things would leave lasting scars. The question was no longer about how to fight but how to rebuild. "I thought victory would feel different," Jessica said, her voice low, as she and Musk walked through the now deserted warehouse where the final confrontation had taken place. They passed the broken equipment, the blood-streaked floors, and the empty rooms that had once been filled with chaos. Musk turned to her, his face etched with fatigue. "Victory doesn't come without a cost. But the fight's not over. It's just beginning." Jessica nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The war against corruption, against those who sought to control the world's future, was far from over. But they had made a significant dent, one that would reverberate across governments and corporations. The truth was out, and there would be no going back. The world's reaction to the fall of Harrison and the collapse of his empire was swift. Headlines across the globe screamed about the high-profile arrest, the widespread conspiracy, and the unmasking of powerful corporate and political figures who had been involved in the plot to sabotage GenCore. But while the news outlets were abuzz, the real work was just beginning. The team had to rebuild what had been torn apart, not only in their lives but in the world they were fighting to change. The GenCore technology that had sparked so much opposition needed to be refined, protected, and distributed in a way that would truly change the future. Musk stood in front of the team once again, his face resolute. "We've made progress, but this is just the start. GenCore is not just a project, it's a movement. We're going to change the world, and we're going to do it by putting people first. We need to make sure that this technology, this vision, doesn't fall into the wrong hands again." His words were a rallying cry for the team. They knew the risks. They knew the enemies they had made. But they also knew that they had something truly revolutionary at their fingertips, something that could reshape the global landscape. "We're going to take the fight to the next level," Musk continued. "We have the power to change the world, and we're not stopping now. It's time to show the world that this is bigger than all of us." Back in the lab, the GenCore team worked tirelessly. The energy production technology that had been the focal point of so much controversy was nearing a new phase. It was more than just an alternative energy source, it was a way to decentralize power, giving people control over their own energy production, removing the chokehold of monopolistic corporations. Musk knew the stakes were higher than ever before. If they succeeded, they would have the power to upend the status quo and build a future that was equitable, sustainable, and just. But if they failed, it could be catastrophic, not just for them, but for the entire world. The final piece of the puzzle was the launch of the first large-scale GenCore facility, which would supply energy to an entire region without reliance on fossil fuels or centralized grids. The technology was ready, the infrastructure was in place, and now it was time to see if it could stand up to the scrutiny and pressure of the world stage. Musk stood at the helm of the project, the weight of his responsibility heavier than ever. But for the first time in months, there was a spark of hope in his eyes. He could see the future they were building, one where humanity was no longer at the mercy of a corrupt system. "We've built this for everyone," Musk said, looking at his team with pride. "It's not just about us. It's about giving everyone the power to choose their future." As the day of the launch drew closer, the atmosphere around the facility was tense. Security was tight, knowing that the forces who had tried to undermine them before would surely make one last desperate attempt to stop them. But Musk was unshaken. He knew that this was the moment. This was when they would either solidify their place in history or be crushed under the weight of those who sought to maintain control. The world watched as the facility went live, the turbines of the GenCore reactor spinning up, and the first burst of clean energy flowed through the system, lighting up homes, businesses, and entire cities in a ripple effect. It was the moment of truth. Hours later, the reports came in. The facility was running smoothly. The energy was flowing. The world was beginning to change. Musk stood before the gathered team, his face a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "We did it. This is just the beginning." The story of Elon Musk, the young genius who had been thrust into a fight for the future of the world, had come full circle. He had faced betrayal, corporate sabotage, and nearly insurmountable odds. But through it all, he had stayed true to his vision of a better world, one powered by clean, decentralized energy. And now, the world was starting to see the fruits of that labor. But the true test, Musk knew, was not in the success of GenCore or the defeat of Harrison. The real test would be in how the world embraced the change they had fought so hard to create. The world had changed. The headlines told the story: GenCore revolutionizes global energy landscape, Elon Musk's vision brings clean energy to the masses, and a new era begins as GenCore leads the charge against climate crisis. But the real story, the one that would echo through the years to come, was not just about the technology or the people behind it. It was about the vision that had driven it all. Musk stood on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the city below. The skyline was bathed in the glow of 1,000 lights powered by the very energy GenCore had made possible. It was a beautiful sight, but it was more than that, it was a symbol of what they had accomplished and the long road ahead. "I think we've done it, Elon," Jessica said, standing beside him. "We've changed everything." Musk nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "We've made the first step. The fight is far from over, though. There will always be forces that want to maintain the status quo. But we've given the world something it didn't have before: choice. And that's what will ultimately drive change." The global impact of GenCore was undeniable. Countries that had once relied on fossil fuels for power now turned to the new technology to meet their energy needs. Communities that had been left in the dark, literally and figuratively, were now thriving with the abundance of clean, renewable energy. The financial backing from investors was pouring in, and the support from governments, though not without its challenges, was beginning to solidify. But with that success came its own set of challenges. "We're seeing the pushback, Ethan reported as he sat across from Musk in the sleek conference room. The air was tense, the weight of the conversation not lost on anyone in the room. "Big Oil is mobilizing. They're throwing everything they've got at GenCore. Lawsuits, disinformation campaigns, lobbying, it's all happening now." Musk took a deep breath. "I expected this. We knew it wouldn't be easy." Jessica added, "They're scared. We're threatening the foundation of their power. We can't afford to back down now." "No one's backing down," Musk replied firmly. "This is bigger than us. We've shown the world what's possible. We have to make sure it stays that way." Behind the scenes, the battle was far from over. Musk's team worked tirelessly to protect GenCore from attacks, legal, political, and corporate. The global economy, still tethered to fossil fuels, fought tooth and nail to resist the shift to renewable energy. But Musk's resolve never wavered. He knew that the real fight wasn't about overcoming technology, it was about changing people's minds. And to do that, they had to demonstrate that this new energy wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity. One evening, after an exhausting round of meetings, Musk found himself alone in the lab. He walked slowly down the hall, past rows of computers, and came to the central core of the GenCore system. He paused for a moment, letting the hum of the machinery fill the room. This was his dream, his vision brought to life. It was more than just a company or an invention, it was the future of humanity. But even with all the success, Musk couldn't shake the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The stakes were higher than ever. This technology wasn't just about making money or achieving fame. It was about saving the planet, and with every step forward, the pressure to get it right grew. He stood in front of the core, his hand hovering over the panel. "I hope we're doing the right thing," he muttered to himself. But deep down, he knew there was no turning back. The world had seen what was possible, and now they were demanding more. Months passed, and GenCore continued to expand its reach. New facilities were built, new cities were powered, and new partnerships were formed. The world was waking up to the reality that clean, sustainable energy was no longer a distant dream, it was here, and it was changing everything. But with success came the question, what next? The idea of expanding GenCore into new areas, space exploration, global transportation, even artificial intelligence, was always at the back of Musk's mind. He knew that the battle for the future was just beginning, and there was much more to do. The foundation was laid, but the skyscraper of the future was still under construction. Musk had always prided himself on thinking beyond the present moment. His eyes were already set on the stars. One morning, as Musk sat in his office overlooking the sprawling headquarters of GenCore, he received a visitor. It was an unexpected one, an old friend. "Mark," Musk said, standing up as his longtime colleague walked through the door. Mark Zuckerberg had been a crucial ally in the early days of the project, and despite their differences, their shared goal of changing the world had always kept them in sync. "I've been watching, Elon," Mark said with a smile. "And I have to say, you've really done it. GenCore is a game changer." Musk gave a half smile. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Mark sat down, his expression growing serious. "Listen, I know you're always thinking about the next big thing. But you've got something here, Elon. GenCore, it's not just a company. It's a movement. And the world is going to need more than just energy." Musk raised an eyebrow. "What are you getting at?" Mark leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "I'm talking about connecting the world. What if we could use GenCore to change the way we think about the planet? What if we used this technology to build not just a better world, but a smarter, more interconnected world?" Musk's mind raced. "What do you have in mind?" Mark smiled. "It's time for the next step, global connectivity powered by GenCore. Imagine a world where everything is seamlessly integrated, a world where we're not just saving energy but using it to power a smarter, more efficient way of living." Musk stood up, pacing the room as the ideas clicked together in his mind. The next chapter in humanity's evolution was already beginning. GenCore wasn't just about energy, it was about creating the framework for a new kind of global society. "All right," Musk said, turning back to Mark. "Let's do it." The next phase of GenCore's plan was born, a world where energy, technology, and communication were all interconnected. A smarter, more sustainable world where every person had access to the tools they needed to thrive. The global network they were about to build would change the way people lived, worked, and connected with one another. Musk had always believed that technology could change the world, but now, he realized it wasn't just about building the future. It was about building it together. As the sun set that evening, casting a warm glow over the city, Musk stood once again on the balcony. He looked out at the world he had helped shape, one powered by clean energy, driven by innovation, and connected by the shared vision of a better tomorrow. The journey had been long, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But for the first time in a long time, Musk felt at peace. He had started something that would leave a legacy far beyond his own lifetime. And that legacy was just getting started. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?